This is the Let's Talk Mental Health series brought to you by Masiviwe, a movement for mental health. Hello and welcome. I'm Anele Gcwabe. I'll be your host for today's episode. The Masiviwe movement is a group of organizations led by the Foundation for Professional Development, working together to make sure that everyone is heard when it comes to mental health. Today, we are talking about HIV and mental health. We're joined by Pholo Ramothwala, who describes himself as a health advocate and a believer in living beyond chronic illnesses or any life setback. Welcome, Pholo.
Hi. Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
So I call myself a health advocate who believes in life beyond chronic medical conditions, whatever life setback that we deal with. I'm a journalist by profession, but I always tell people that I only worked for 3 months. So I don't qualify to call myself a journalist. I just love life. I like healthy living. I like positive living. And more importantly, I believe that we can live life beyond whatever challenges that we are faced with.
Thank you for sharing all of that about yourself, Pholo. I look forward to picking your brain and getting your insights in our discussion today. But before we do that, let's watch this short video.
They told me when I was 13 that I was born HIV positive.
I've been journeying with mental health. I've been journeying with HIV. I've been journeying with substance use. I got tested because I kept on getting sick a lot. That was in 2003. I went to the clinic and the nurse did my blood test. The result came back positive and she told me that I would only have 5 years to live.
I was raised by my grandmother, and then she also passed away in 2009. And then I was taking care of my aunt. At that time, it was a stage where I'm going to become a teenager. So they said, we have something to tell you. One of the reasons you're drinking these pills is because of you were born HIV positive. It was so scary. I did not understand. It was so depressing to me. Like, honestly, it was so depressing. Because I remember at school, while they were teaching us how you get infected with HIV, I was always telling myself, I would never have that day.
I was staying at a women's shelter, and when I told the lady in charge, the first thing she said to me is, "Let me pray for you." And I thought, yep, I'm dying. When people would tell me to stop drinking, I would say no. I'd rather die from drinking rather than die from HIV, so leave me alone.
I went to so many psychologists as much as I could. My aunt did my best, but I was failing because at that time I did not understand and I did not want to accept, and I keep on having questions, why me?
The most important tool at the beginning was psychotherapy, to be able to talk about exactly what I was feeling and going through. Talking was my best thing, and it was a new thing for me. I think I had to learn to trust, because trust was also a big issue for me. Things like meditation, that was a tool I also used. I just light my candle, burn some incense, and just lie there and do the breathing, and it helps.
Cooking, it also helped me a lot. The minute I eat and I cook something that I love, it melts my heart. So cooking, it really also helped me mentally. Talking to people who are at the same condition as you helped me the most.
It's the support group members, because they know what you're going through and they understand, and they always had positive advice.
I have learned to be the voice to the voiceless. I have learned to pick up another person when it's down. You are not directing that to now you're positive or what. It's all about loving yourself, drinking your medication.
I firmly believe in support groups because I know how they helped me. I don't think I'd be sitting here today if it wasn't for a support group.
That is one of the videos in our Let's Talk Mental Health series. The sad fact about that video is that it actually featured one other member in the support group, a man who, having initially approved the video, came back and asked us to edit him out of the video. He said that he felt too exposed to stigma. Pholo, what's your experience? What has your experience been as someone who speaks openly about HIV and living with HIV?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that he pulled out. I think it's a lesson on its own and a lesson to the public that because we lack there is this environment that has been created where a person who's living with HIV, especially those who have not spoken about their status, they don't feel safe. So they suddenly feel vulnerable that if more people are going to know about my status, then I might not be accepted in certain environments or I might be treated differently. I think what the lesson with this also is that especially with us men, when you mentioned that he pulled out, and this is not to judge him because I truly understand that how he felt. But the important thing is that we need to think about why do people decide to hide themselves because they are living with HIV. Because as you introduced me, I've been living with HIV for over 25 years. And I'm not ashamed that I'm living with HIV, but because I have empowered myself. But there are people who are not empowered that might feel vulnerable to talking about their status openly.
Sure, this makes sense, Pholo. I just have a follow-up question to this. Is it maybe the different communities or people we interact with that sometimes come in and when we get to our communities and are open about our status, we are accepted, where some communities accept you more than others would, and others would reject you more than others would, because we do say that the man had initially accepted to be part of the series, but then he came back later and said he was too exposed to stigma. Could it be that something did happen to him and that he was initially not ashamed, but had to retract because of treatment?
Sometimes it's the anticipation of what people might say. So it could have been that perhaps the idea or the desire to share their story and the desire to make a difference encouraged him to want to talk about their status. But when you compare that with the reality of what's out there when it comes to HIV and when it comes to how people perceive HIV in some communities, then he might have decided, I'd rather be safe than sorry. And I have had that experience where we've had conversations with people and they wanted to share their stories with other beyond their community. And they're like, no, I don't think I want to do it anymore. So I think the value of this is that it's important as a person who's living with HIV, before you even want to talk about other your status beyond your circle, it's important to understand what you're dealing with, that you're living with HIV, we're living acceptance. Actually, the point that I want to make is that acceptance is important when you're living with HIV, because then it empowers you. You don't feel what we call internalized stigma. You don't feel ashamed that you did something wrong. You don't feel ashamed that people might judge you in a certain way. Here's an interesting fact. Most people in South Africa, actually in Southern Africa, who are living with HIV today, they get HIV from a relationship that they feel that it's the one. The idea that people are getting infected with HIV because they sleep around and all that, we've gone past that. And unfortunately, there are people who still feel ashamed that maybe people will judge them because they think they've been sleeping around. We've gone past that. The internalized stigma and acceptance is important. But also people outside, externally, need to help us by creating an environment that's accepting, by not judging people who are living with HIV, or by not making negative comments. There's a comment where somebody say, no, that those people with AIDS. Once you say that, it creates stigma, not just, external, but also internalized, because that person, they associate AIDS with death, and then they stop talking about themselves or empowering themselves to be able to live life beyond HIV.
Hey, well, thanks for that clarity, Pholo. So back to the video, Louise talks about how getting her HIV diagnosis impacted on her mental health. Please tell us about your experience. How has living with HIV been for your mental health?
Look, I can actually relate with her because at the first days, and I tested positive in 1999. So that's like many months ago. And between that, in the early days, and I was still young, I was still at university, you kind of think I'm going to die. What happens to my dreams? What happens to the things that I said I want to do for myself? So it's all these different emotions that one has to go through in a very short period of time, because being told that you are HIV positive is a split second thing, but then you have to live with it for the rest of your life. So I had to make sure that I understand what living with HIV means, whether I can be able to manage it and live positively. And more importantly, I then went to look for other people who are living with HIV, who are living with it positively, to empower myself to be able to say, okay, I can do this. And then what I also did is that then I spoke to my family. I told my family that I'm living with HIV. I'm not going anywhere. I'm looking after myself. And that created additional support for me to be able to experience or to worry about stigma. And something that I learned is that then the more I talked openly about my status, the environment, I always find that the environment it's allowing me to be able to talk openly. And then where I find that the environment, I'll call it hostile or it's negative towards me as a person living with HIV, I try to step back a little bit, but I don't take it too personal because I think people differ in opinions, and I try to move away and go to spaces where I would feel safe and okay to talk about my status. Or in some cases, I just don't talk about it because I don't think the environment allows it.
Today's episode, we are talking about HIV and mental health with Pholo Ramothwala. We watched a short video that Masiviwe put together called I'm Positive, Let's Talk, which featured members of a SADC mental health support group. If you missed it, you can find it on the Masiviwe website on masiviwe.org.za in the library section. In South Africa, there is a big drive to get people who know they are HIV positive to get into treatment and to stay on their treatment. The Minister of Health is calling the campaign Close the Gap, and the target is to reach 1.1 million people by the end of this year. What role do you think mental health plays in people seeking treatment and staying on it?
It plays a big role, Anele. The biggest, in fact, it's the biggest contributor to whether a person takes medication or not. So from the day that a person tests HIV positive, the information that they get empowers them or prepares them to then say, I'm ready to take my medication. Look, taking antiretroviral medication is a long-term commitment. And mentally, people then start thinking, I'm going to take this pill for the rest of my life. Then once they start creating that conflict in their minds that, will I be able to take this for the rest of my life? And is this medication going to remind me that I'm HIV positive every day? That then affects whether they go and take their treatment. And then in some cases, a person will start taking treatment, but because then every day when they take this meds, then they start being reminded that they're living with HIV, then they stop because they believe that it will help them to forget that they are living with HIV. So the mental wellness and being able to prepare people mentally to take medication and to accept that they are living with HIV is important. So it's a package. It starts from the day a person tests positive and what information that they get, preparing them to be able to understand that this is a lifelong commitment. There's nothing wrong with taking this medication. People take medication for hypertension. I take medication for diabetes. So it's just the stigma and the lack of understanding when it comes to what happens when you take medication. Association of taking medication with a reminder that I'm living with HIV can be problematic. So it's important to prepare people to mentally understand, accept that they will be taking medication for the rest of their lives. And more important, that there's nothing wrong with taking medication. There are people taking medication for all different conditions, and they are living their best lives.
Yes, absolutely true. I mean, there are people who take medication for diabetes and they don't even hide it. They take it right in front of us every day. Thank you for that, Pholo. In the video, going back to the video, Louise talks about how getting an HIV diagnosis meant she thought it meant she was going to live and die within 5 years. What do you think healthcare workers need to be mindful of regarding people's mental health when getting their diagnosis?
I hope we have gone past the period where a healthcare professional will tell somebody that you've got 5 years to live. Because if you were to look for an example that there is no limit in how long you live with HIV, I'm one of those examples where I've been living with HIV for the past 25 years. I think what we need to be doing, and for healthcare professionals to be doing now, is to help people understand that living with HIV is not a death sentence. Is to help people to understand that living with HIV is a chronic condition that can be managed with your medication. It's the responsibility or part of the healthcare worker's responsibility to create that education. But what I've learned, Anele, is that it's not just the healthcare worker that needs to educate. We need to educate ourselves also as people who are living with HIV or who are living with the condition, because the healthcare worker is not going with you home. You are the one who's going home. So empowering yourself with that information helps you to positively deal with your condition, but also to be able, when information or words that are said around HIV that are stigmatizing, because you are empowered, then you know that that's not true. When a person says you have AIDS, you know that you don't have AIDS, you have HIV. It's things like that will reduce stigma, but the environment outside and the healthcare workers play an important role. You can't have a healthcare worker that shouts in the corridor to say, those who are here for antiretrovirals, come this side. There is still some high level of sensitivity by people who are taking antiretroviral medication, and it's important that we protect that privacy.
How often do you come across people who still think that they are going to die within 5 years after being diagnosed with HIV? Is it still something that is prevalent today?
Yeah, I see it, and I don't get used to it. Let me put it this way: that even today, you still have people who are testing positive, and they feel that they're going to die. What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my children? So I've learned that the younger generation are understanding. They understand that there's medication, there's treatment. It's the older generation who test positive today that they feel that, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to die. And when I interrogated some of the cases that I've dealt with, I found that it's because they never thought about HIV and they never paid attention to any development when it comes to HIV and treatment. Whereas the younger groups, they see it on social media. Most of them, they've been exposed to HIV education in school. Like, I didn't get any education about HIV in school. So it's still there. And I think the message that I would give regarding this is that HIV is not a death sentence. If you think when you have HIV, or if you test HIV today and you think you're going to die, I promise you're going to get bored. You're going to get bored of waiting to die, and all that you need to do is to look after yourself. The risk that people must know is that if you don't take care of yourself, you don't take your medication, then you're killing yourself. And that's different from you saying HIV is killing you. Those are two different things that I would want people to take. When you look after yourself, you live a healthy and a positive life. Many, many years, you shouldn't be thinking about death. But if you don't look after yourself, then you are inviting death. That's what I can say about this.
So, Pholo, just following up on the perception of young people when it comes to getting a diagnosis and the difference between them and the older people and their reactions. I was reading an article the other day where the Minister of Health says that our awareness campaigns have made young people sort of immune to the dangers of HIV, saying that while it's not a stigma, it's still dangerous. And now young people, as you say, look at it as, okay, if I get infected, I'll just take my treatment. And older people are saying, if I get infected, I don't even want to be reminded about it because it's going to remind me that I'm going to die and I'm not going to take my treatment. How do we close the gap between those two perceptions? Because they're worlds apart. One is dangerous for the other, and the other is also dangerous on the other hand. How do we bring them together to a healthy state where everybody's mental health is protected?
Yeah. That's something that I believe we are dealing with at the moment, that the younger generation needs to understand that because there is medication, then you don't have to have HIV. I always say to people, guys, you don't have to have HIV. It's not nice to live with HIV. And I think the kind of the irony of young people not being scared because then they say there's medication. Then you show them the antiretroviral pill and they're like, oh, that thing is too big to swallow. So I think being on medication, it's not pleasant. So I would encourage young people to still be able to protect themselves, not to expose themselves to HIV. And then the older generation to understand that there is life beyond HIV. And I think to bring it back to our conversation around stigma and discrimination, and even with the two generations, then you find that the level of stigma is also different. So let me give you an example. I worked with one of the big universities in Gauteng where the first year students who test HIV positive get referred to me. And one of the challenges is that as much as they understood HIV, they knew a lot about HIV. In fact, some of them found out that they are living with HIV for the first time and they got infected with HIV at birth. And the stigma that they experience more is around internalized stigma. So suddenly they start feeling like, hey, what are people going to think about me? What are people going to say about me? They try to hide their medication. They try to not take their medication because now they are worried. What else before they tested, then it's like, no, HIV is a normal thing. We can accept it, but it becomes personal. And then once it becomes personal, then the perspective changes. So it's important that young people understand that there is still HIV. And it's important that young people understand that they can be affected by stigma. And when they're affected by stigma, it affects them mentally, especially if you're a student and then you are living with HIV, you start worrying about, the medication and all the related things that maybe you don't want your roommate to know that you're living with HIV. Then it affects you mentally. You need to be able to go and talk to other people. Now I'm addressing those who might be living with HIV. Go talk to other people, talk to other healthcare professionals to say, I would like to talk to other people. What else is out there, information that I can learn about living with HIV positively? And the key word is positive.
As we're about to wrap up, is there anything we haven't covered that you think is very, very important and we need to talk about?
Yeah. I think what I can say, Anele, is that mental health, it's not a luxury. Mental health, it's a need. It's something that we need to pay attention to. We need to make sure that we accept the conditions that we have, but also let's make it a habit to talk to other people. Let's make it a habit to learn more about mental health and to talk about the issues that we are dealing with. We shouldn't bottle up the medical conditions and the challenges that we think these conditions bring to us, because there is a solution out there for you.